Welcome to this Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival event, and welcome to Aberystwyth. Croeso i'r digwyddiad Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival hwn, a chroeso I Aberystwyth. Aberystwyth, the cultural capital of Wales, home to Aberystwyth University and the National Library of Wales, once home to Welsh princes. The Bearits of Wales is the jewel in the crown of Cardigan Bay's stunning coastline and home to hugely successful TV drama Hinterland. And now, the streets that have become familiar to fictional D.I. Mathias's many fans are getting ready to welcome celebrities from the worlds of crime fiction and crime drama. Because Aberystwyth is home to Wales's first ever international crime fiction event, Gŵyl Crime Cymru Festival. During the early May bank holiday weekend of 2022, Aber, as the town is affectionately known, will play host to a multitude of events that will offer something for every fan of crime fiction and drama. Internationally successful authors will entertain and meet readers in historic buildings. Pub quizzes will bring together authors and readers. Writing workshops, meet the agent sessions, and informal readings will help encourage and develop new writing talent. And in sparkling celebration of new Welsh talent, a champagne reception for Crime Cymru's first crime novel competition winners. This will be an Aber bank holiday weekend like no other. So, come for the crime fiction and take Cymru home in your hearts. Rydym yn edrych ymlaen yn fawr iawn at eich croesawu I Aberystwyth ac I Geredigion.
Good evening. On behalf of Crime Cymru and our festival partners, Aberystwyth Town Council, welcome to the very first panel of Gwyl Cymru Crime Festival Online. I'm Gail Williams and I'm delighted to welcome you here to this event tonight. As you've just heard, we're featuring an independent Welsh bookshop at each panel. The bookshop for our event is cover to cover in Mumbles, Swansea. So, if you're inspired to read any of the books you hear about this evening, please do consider buying from them. At the end of our session, for your convenience, you'll be taken to the programme page of our website where there's a click-through link on our event to cover. I'm joined this evening by three wonderful authors. Firstly, we have Cathy Ace. She's a prolific writer, and while she was born and raised in Swansea, she now resides in Canada. Hi, Cathy.
Good morning from Canada, and good evening to Wales.
Then we have Gail Williams, who you'll know as GB Williams. Gail was also raised in Swansea and is one of Crime Cymru's up-and-coming talents.
Hiya.
Hi Gail, how are you?
I'm fine, but I wasn't born in Swansea. I was raised in Kent. I just live in Swansea.
Oh, there we go, my mistake. And finally, we have Martin Edwards, who is the latest recipient of the CWA Diamond Dagger, the highest honour in UK crime writing.
Hello Amy, hello everyone, great to be with you.
Hi Martin, how are you?
I'm fine, delighted to be joining you today.
Good. Thank you all for chatting with me today, and I'm sure the audience is very appreciative. So let's get down to business, I suppose. Now, in the last couple of decades, crime fiction has been experiencing a wave of popularity, a roaring 20s, if you will. What was it about crime fiction in particular that made you want to write it? If I start with you, Cathy?
Well, I blame my mother. Okay, I'll just get this out there and blame my mother. No, seriously, Bryn Hyfryd Library has got quite a lot to answer for, because I went to Bryn Hyfryd Junior School and I used to use Bryn Hyfryd Library as my local library. And I could probably only deal with the lower shelves. upon which they carefully arranged the Nancy Drew books, the Hardy Boys books, the Enid Blyton Famous Five and Secret Seven books. So, you know, and then I graduated onto my mum's Agatha Christie books. So, as I say, Brynhyfryd Library and my mum, I grew up reading criminal themed adventures and classic murder mysteries, and that continued throughout my life. So I think when it came time to write fiction, it was more or less a natural progression for me. I mean, I've read the classics and love them, but, you know, I'll read Jane Austen. I'm waiting for someone to be murdered, because for me, then that's when the story begins. So the mystery, the puzzle, the adventure, the solving of the clues, I love all of that. And growing up with it, that was my natural go-to. This is what you love. This is what you write. And I still try to write what I love to read. So blame my mother.
What about you, Gail?
I've always liked crime fiction, and like Cathy, I've read all the Enid Blyton type stuff, Secret Seven, the Famous Five, but I always thought it was all a bit too smart for me and I couldn't possibly do it. So I'm actually going to blame Mills and Boon, because they rejected 4 of my manuscripts, telling me there was far too much plot. So I thought, well, if there's far too much plot in what I write as romance, I'm going to write crime and see how that turns out. And it turns out really well, surprisingly. So yeah, it comes from there.
And Martin?
Well, for me, it began when I was 8 years old. It's in some ways not a dissimilar story to Cathy's, because I came across Agatha Christie at that age, at that tender age, and I read The Murder at the Vicarage, and I was absolutely hooked. Yeah, the idea of the clues, the detective, the amateur detective, Miss Marple, the twists, the surprise solution, and all that. And 2 things happened as a result of that experience. Firstly, I fell in love with the idea of detective fiction, crime fiction. And secondly, really at the same time, I wanted to tell that kind of story. I wanted to be a detective writer myself. And so I started actually writing. I've still got my early efforts at 9 or 10 years old, and I've been writing and reading ever since.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So the books that the 3 of you write are all very different. The locations, the settings are all very different. What made you choose those settings for the basis of your novels? Gail, if we start with you.
Well, if we're going to talk about The Chair, which is the latest novel, that one's set in between London and Cadair Idris. Now, I actually picked them for being as opposed to one another as possible, but also it's a big thing for the plot that where the main action takes place, there is no Wi-Fi. There's no kind of communications there. Now, there are a number of places around Wales where you will find that the Wi-Fi and the phone signals and everything else drop out. So I thought, well, Cadair Idris is a great place. I mean, it's a beautiful area anyway, but it is quite isolated. And if you're actually up on Cadair Idris itself, there's an awful lot of things that can go wrong and can cost a human their lives for no malicious reason other than it's a mountain, it gets cold, and it is dangerous. And people tend to forget that dangerous places aren't just mean streets, but they can be cold mountains too. So I really love that. I mean, I love Cadair Idris. I'm not been up Cadair Idris myself because I was going to go and then lockdown happened. But I've done an awful lot of mountain walking with some of the interests that I have, so I know how bad it can get. But that was what drew me to Cadair Idris, even though I live in South Wales. Yeah.
And Martin, what about you?
Well, I've been around a long time, so I've written quite a few books in many different settings and short stories too. Wales is featured in short stories as a setting, and also in scenes in a couple of novels as well, including the one I'm writing just now. But my first series was set in Liverpool because I was working in Liverpool. I've worked there for many years, and so it seemed a very atmospheric, exciting place to write about. And also over the course of a series to chart the revival of a city from very difficult times to enjoying quite a renaissance. That was an interesting kind of arc to the series. And then I moved to the countryside. I've been writing a series set in the Lake District. The next one comes out in July, but I've written 8 in that series, and of course that's a very different dynamic. You've got the glorious landscape, you've got the heritage, the literary heritage as well. So moving around different locations in the Lake District. And my most recent series, which is set in 1930, I've had a variety of settings in the 2 books and the one I'm writing at the moment. So quite a mixture of different places. So altogether, quite a variety.
Quite a variety, yes, absolutely. And Cathy?
Well, quite a variety as well for me, yes. I mean, the Kate Morgan mysteries, each book in the series is set in a different country. But Kate herself is, like me, Welsh Canadian. And for me, I chose each country and each specific location where it's set because I've either lived or worked there. I've had a very peripatetic life myself. So I was able to share that enthusiasm for art and architecture and history through Kate. But what I was also interested in was Kate's a part of the Welsh diaspora like I am, and she goes there being Welsh and sees it through Welsh eyes. So that for me was interesting. The Wise Inquiries Agency mysteries are all set in London, mainly Wales, at a fictional Welsh stately home. And I just wanted to play somewhere posh because I'm not. So for me, that was lovely. And for my psychological thriller, The Wrong Boy, it's not Worm's Head and Rossilly, but the location, the Dragon's Head and Rosthraig, were very much inspired by that. And growing up in Swansea, going to the Gower Peninsula, you know, all the time, that for me is such an atmospheric place. I wanted to bring that atmosphere to people through the page. But I do tend to write about places that I know quite well, except for Chellingworth Hall and the village of Anwen by Wye, which are fictional constructions of mine. But, you know, they're nice and they're calm and they're posh. And I do enjoy a bit of posh now and again.
Fantastic. Now, that actually leads me on to the next question really well, actually. And that is, what inspires you? Is it a certain event? Is it books that you've read in the past? Is it locations, potentially? So, Martin, if we come to you first.
Well, it will be different things for different books. Occasionally it will be a location, in my case, but very often it's an idea for the way that people behave, an interesting murder motive. That's often the starting point in the Lake District series. I move around the Lake District, as I say, but the books begin with an idea for a crime. So I begin by knowing who killed whom and why, and then I develop from there. But with Gallows Court, which was the first book set in 1930, I began with a character. I wanted to write something different. I wanted to write something set in the 30s. And I began with the idea of a character who became Rachel Savonay. And all I knew about her was that she was very, very rich. She's mysterious. She's moved to London. She becomes involved in mysterious murder mystery. And that was about it. And I wrote a short story about the character to see if I enjoyed writing about her. And I found I did. And so I started plunging into the writing of the novel without knowing how it was going to end. So that was a different kind of inspiration. The inspiration came from that one particular character. So I've tried a number of different approaches over the years, and each of them has a lot to be said for it.
Brilliant. And do you have a preference for those different methods?
Not really. I've tended to write more books that where I've known the outcome. But I think the important thing is to be captured by something that excites you, whether it's a place, whether it's a character, whether it's a murder motive. The important thing is to really love the central idea, because you can be stuck with it for quite a long time whilst you're writing the book. So you need to believe in it, and that belief, all being well, takes you through the ups and downs of the writing process. And the belief is really important, because if you don't believe, it's hard to expect the readers to believe. So you've got to really find something, whatever it may be, that really excites you.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. What about you, Cathy?
In terms of inspiration, well, look, again, admission here, I quite often walk around thinking, oh, what a great way to kill someone. You know, you'll suddenly get this idea, or you'll see something or hear something, and you think that would be a brilliant way to kill someone. But what type of a person would use that method? And where would they be in order to be able to access that method? What would their life be like that would make that happen? So quite often there's a method of murder that will pop into my head. That's very much what happened with the first Kate Morgan mystery. I heard it on BBC Radio 4 and I thought, what a brilliant way to kill someone. It wasn't about how to kill someone, I should say that. And I can't tell you what it is, because then I'd be giving away the plot. Alternatively, it will be a location or a setting, which makes me think, if people lived here, imagine what their lives would be like, imbued with that sense of place. And as Martin says, it will be different for each book. I do find that when I look back, where the book started in my head tends to be from a different place. But critical that you're dealing with people that you're prepared to spend time with. I can't say I create likable characters always, but I do try to create relatable characters, because all of us have people in our lives with whom we can say, oh, that reminds me of so-and-so, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So places and people and methods and motives, depending upon the book, and it's different each time, to be perfectly honest with you.
I have to say, I have a very soft spot for unlikable characters. I don't know what that says about me. They do tend to be my favourites. What about you, Gail? What inspires you?
I'm a bit, as Cathy said, it all depends on where it is. So with my first series, the Locked series, that all came out because I was trying to do a 200-word character sketch on the guy who turned out to be Charlie Bell. And we're now 3 novels later. And it just, because I knew who he was, I knew where he had to be, and it's in a prison. And you asked about location earlier. Well, he's in a prison, and that's it. All through that series of books, you never find out what the location actually is. I never actually state it. So it's only about him being in that prison in the first book, and then what happens to him after. So those were very much driven by Charlie and his character and what happens to him through his life. With The Chair, however, it was actually more about the crime. It actually comes from, it starts with a hacking, so I'm not giving anything major away with this. But I read an article in the paper where some big corporation had been hacked into because a guy had a fish tank in the foyer, and it was all controlled for temperature and cleaning by an app on his phone. So they broke into his phone and therefore got into all the corporation that he had access to. And that was the inspiration for The Chair. So I've written other books, but those are the 4 published ones. But my crime stuff, and I've got a series of short stories out called The Last Cut Casebook. They are all had something very different. It was just, there would be one spark and the rest of it falls into place behind it. There's one in the short stories where the character basically came knocking on the inside of my head and told me to write him, so I did. It all very much depends on what inspires you in that moment. But as Cathy and Martin both said, if you don't like your characters, they're very hard to carry on writing. So even the bad guys, I kind of have a soft spot for. Baron in The Chair is somebody that he's not a bad guy, but he's very interesting, and a lot of people seem to have developed a liking for Baron, which I never expected anyone to.
So as writers, and this is a question that I really enjoy asking authors, are you planners or are you pantsers? And now what I mean by that is, do you plan in minute detail what's going to happen within your books, or do you fly by the seat of your pants and just write what comes to your mind? If we start with you, Cathy.
It's just confession day here, isn't it? Control freak. I'm a complete control freak. I'm absolutely, definitely a plotter. When I am plotting a book, it starts in my head, and I work my way through from the beginning through the middle to the end of the book. as a film in my head. So I see it filmically, first of all, and I might be weeding or mowing the lawn or whatever when I'm doing that. Then I will do an outline, I will do chapter summaries, I will do chapter outlines, make sure, hopefully, I get all the plot sorted out during that point. Then I finally start to, having plotted and done the research, I finally start to write the book or type the book. I'm very much a plotter. I tried once to be a pantster. It just doesn't work for me. I admire those people who can start a book, get halfway through it, not know who's done it until they get to the end. How wonderful for them to take that journey that way. For me, I take that creative journey in my head, seeing the film, and then I get to plot it and try to get the film in my head onto the page without the words getting in the way, so that the reader gets the experience I've had in my head.
Sort of cinematic experience while they're reading then, I suppose.
That's what I hope for, because as a storyteller, I want them to experience the story rather than necessarily read the book. Although I would like them all to read all the books as well.
And what about you, Gail? Are you a planner or pantser?
I'm weird. I plan it. I know what's going to happen. I know A, and I know the start and I know the end. And I will write out quite meticulous plans, and then I'll go and write it and totally forget the plan and go off course, and my characters do whatever they want, regardless of what I'm telling them. And I tend to go with what the characters do because it's way more believable because that's what they do. So at the moment, I've just started the first of a trilogy. And I have to say, I write steampunk as well as crime. And this one's steampunk. It has gone in a completely different direction to the direction that I thought it was going to go. But I'm enjoying it so much, I'm letting it go. That's kind of what happened with Locked Up as well. The chair was much more planned. So when I'm writing crime, I know what the crime is. I know what clues need to be found in order to point to the criminal. I've only ever written one book where I didn't know who the criminal was. And a lot of people say that they don't realise who the criminal is until right at the end. And that was the moment at which I realised who it was. So I have done that myself, but mostly I know what the crime is, I know what the clues are, I know who the villain is. They just don't necessarily go on the journey I was expecting when I planned it. So yeah, it's a bit of a half of one and half a dozen of one and six of the other.
Do you find then that it takes a lot of editing and rewriting if the characters go on unexpected journeys?
It doesn't, because I always make sure that they keep to the point. They might not go the route I thought to get to it, and I don't always get the clues coming out in the order that I thought they would. But no, I do make sure it does take a lot of editing, because I think all books do, because the first draft is only you telling yourself the story. But no, I don't find don't tend to miss something. Well, I haven't so far yet.
What about you, Martin?
Well, I began with the early Liverpool books, planning those in quite a bit of detail, not just knowing the ending, but working out how the mystery was going to be solved. And then I think I became more confident. The more you write, the more confidence you have, and the more ambitious maybe you become as well. You want to try different things. And so I started to plan less. And then when I turned to the Lake District series, as I mentioned, I had the idea of just working out the murder motive, but not planning how Hannah and Daniel, who are the two protagonists in the series, how they would interact, or how one or other or both of them would solve the mystery. And then with Gallows Court, the book set in 1930, the one that began with the idea of Rachel as a character, I didn't plan that at all. I have to say, it did take me 3 years as a result to write that book. It was very much an experiment. There was no contract, no publisher. It was a shot in the dark in more ways than one. But it was something I felt ready to do, having written a variety of stories in different styles. I wanted to take that leap and explore the possibilities of the character. And I was very lucky that it worked out really, really well. The second book featuring Rachel, however, is more of a detective story, and a pretty elaborate one too. So that one is quite extensively planned. That's a book called Mortmain Hall, and that actually has a clue finder at the end, which lists 30 clues to the solution. So you can imagine that takes quite a bit of planning. So that's quite different from the way I approach Gallows Court. And again, it illustrates, I think, the appeal of variety. So even when you're working with the same characters and the same setting to some extent, you can try different things as a writer and keep yourself interested and engaged all the time, trying to find out something fresh, as well as hoping that the reader will be.
Fantastic. And it does, I've read all of your books, all three of you, and I've loved all of them. And it feels, as an avid reader, I mean, you can kind of see some of my bookcases behind me, it almost feels like I'm able to live vicariously through characters and feel like a bit of a detective myself. Yeah. And so I think that a lot of readers really appreciate that. So talking now a little bit about characters and the very interesting times that we find ourselves in. I won't mention the C word or the P word, but let's talk a little bit about what you think your characters might be doing to keep themselves occupied during this time. If we start with you, Gail.
Well, if we stick with the chair, I think Cobb would be having a whale of a time because he's been avoiding people for years. The whole point of him being up on Cadair Idris is to not deal with people. So he's happy as lark. He is. Branwen, on the other hand, is probably going to be struggling with some of the surgery. She's a vet, so she has to carry on working very much like doctors do. So she does have to deal with the public. She will have to take obviously extra precautions. Of course, like every vet, you're always hand sanitizing anyway. So a lot of that would be second nature to her as well. As far as the not being able to go out and greet people, one of the things that a lot of people are missing is the ability to go out around people's houses, go down the pub and all the rest of it. And she's not going to miss that very much. There's only really Emma in the village that she'd miss. And they can do an awful lot of their stuff by Skyping, texting, and all the rest of it, because they're that kind of generation. So she's fine. She's just, there's going to be issues with some of the work colleagues and some of the clients. So they're fine. If we're talking about the Lot series, Charlie's absolutely fine because, like Cobb, he doesn't like people. I can't imagine where all of my characters get this no cave away from me thing in their heads, she says. But yeah, I think Branwen and Cobb would be happy as Larry as they are. Sorry. Like me through lockdown, I've been fine.
What about yours, Martin?
Well, I think Hannah and Daniel from the Lake District series, I actually planned the new book, The Crooked Shore, before the pandemic. And then whilst I was writing it, of course, the pandemic descends upon us all. And like many writers, I had to take a decision. Do I factor in the pandemic into the story, or do I push it back in time? And because it's about 5 or 6 years since I last wrote the Lake District Mystery, I felt entitled to push it back to 2019. So the pandemic doesn't get a mention. And I think that one of the reasons I'm a writer, that I love writing, is that I live in my imagination, escape from the real world. And of course, there's been a lot of reasons to escape in the last 12 months for all of it. And for me, I've found that writing the therapeutic value of creativity has been a wonderful consolation for not seeing people, not seeing family. I've not seen my daughter for 16 months. It's dreadful in a way, but you have to get through these things. And I think that writing and reading are wonderful forms of escape to liberate the imagination, and it helps you to work through things that you may be experiencing in your real life. And that's a great plus, I think, that that imaginative power.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think I cannot remember for the life of me where the quote came from, but it goes along the lines of books give you somewhere to go when you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely true. Completely true.
Absolutely.
What about your characters, Cathy? What would they be up to?
Well, the people in the village of Rosthraig would be in the village. The pub would be shut. They'd all be eating outside. I can't imagine what they'd be getting up to. They're so significantly dysfunctional. I'd be amazed if they come out of lockdown with anybody still alive, frankly. The women of the Wise Inquiries Agency would not be able to be doing their detecting, but I'm sure Carol would find out some way to run the business online somehow, and tea would still be taken in the dower house, so that would be fine. Kate, now she travels from book to book to book, so she would not be traveling. And like Martin's saying, when I was writing the last book, I was actually on a cruise ship in the Caribbean when the world locked down. The book was set in the Caribbean, so I continued on with that as though the pandemic hadn't happened. But this book, The Corpse with the Iron Will, comes out in June, and it's set, unusually, Kate and Bud are at home. And I really wanted to take the opportunity to force Kate, because I don't allow her to do anything, I force her to do things, to reconsider the concept of what home and community mean. Because I do think that people find my books, maybe they won't find them for 10 years. After today, of course, they'll all be reading them. But if they don't find my book for 10 years, I don't want to smush their face into the pandemic. I don't know what will have happened between now and whenever they're reading them. So it's not a pandemic book, but it does consider the concept of home as a place of security and community as a concept of support. So for me, that's the way I've addressed Kate, not dealing with the pandemic, but living in a world in which the pandemic will never exist. And it's been a very interesting process for me because she lives essentially where I live. So I've been able to examine my own feelings about home, security, and community as I've been writing the book. Knowing that when most people read, they're reading to escape and be entertained in some way. So I'm just going to allow them to do that, and I will not be writing pandemic anything into anything I write.
Lovely. So things obviously here in Wales have just started to open back up again. The pubs are now open. I know many people are thrilled about that. I can live without the pubs. You know, it's neither here nor there for me. But I'm very much looking to travel again and you know, and to go to places that I've missed out on in the last, 15 months. So is there anywhere in Wales in particular that you'd really love to visit now that things are starting to get back to some kind of normality? Should we start with you, Martin?
Well, quite a few places. I've spent a lot of time in Wales over the years. I live in Cheshire. I spent most of my life in Cheshire, but of course that's right next door to North Wales. So not so much South Wales. I don't know that as well, but Mid Wales, Aberdyfi, Aberystwyth, Borth, places around there, Math as well, but also the North Wales coast. Many holidays, many trips. Many business visits as well, writing events. So one place I feel a great escapist affection for, I must say, I would love to go back there, is Port Mary.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
I had a little trip planned there, which obviously didn't happen. So I echo your sentiment in really looking forward to going there.
Yeah.
What about you, Cathy?
Well,
over there, all the way over in Canada.
Yeah, I haven't been in Wales since, it'll be 2 years in July, and anywhere my mum is. I want to be in my mum's living room with my sister and my mum. And so long as we can hug, that'll be lovely. But then we're going to have to go to the Gower Peninsula, and then we're going to have to go to Joe's Ice Cream Parlour in Mumbles. Mum, if you're watching this, Sue, if you're watching this, you have to be with me, of course, for it to be perfect. But that would be perfection for me. I'm missing my mum and my sister terribly. Many visits were planned and have not happened. So anywhere my mum is, please. She can't come here because she's in her late 80s, not that she could at the moment anyway, but yeah, anywhere my mum is, preferably Joe's Ice Cream Parlour with my mum and my sis.
Joe's Ice Cream is wonderful. What about you, Gail?
I think I want a gate crash on.
Cadair dress?
Actually, we're planning next to go to Criccieth, which is obviously just north of Cadair Idris. I'd like to spend a little bit more time on the Clean Peninsula. We're really lucky. We've got a camper van, so we can basically go anywhere we like, whenever we like. Hoping this week, my husband works shifts, luckily, so he gets days off during the week. We're hoping to go down to Oxwich Bay and maybe do some kayaking or some paddle boarding or something down there, and just get away from the four walls. So yeah, but anywhere, if we have a camper van, we'll go. We're next going up to Shropshire, to Shrewsbury, which is unfortunately just across the border. But yeah, got a week there in September. I'm looking forward to.
Well, we're having the weather for it at the moment, aren't we? It is absolutely glorious, and I really hope that this is the start of our summer. Okay, now this is my favourite question. I've done a few of these panels, and I ask this to everyone that I interview, and it is, what are your desert island books? So the rules of the game, you get to take 3 books with you to a desert island. What are those 3? Should we start with you, Gail?
I have no idea. Probably Deadlier. Actually, I've just looked around the corner. Deadlier is about this thick. It is all women short stories written by women crime writers, and it'll take me probably about 3 years to go through just that book alone. So we'll start with that one. Then, do they all need to be crime fiction?
No, anything you'd like.
I'd probably go for a survival book with baby years if I'm on a desert island, to be frank. Learn how to fish and survive. And oddly enough, one of the other ones that I'd like to take is the Bible, not because I'm particularly Christian. I believe in God. I have a problem with religion, but there are some extraordinarily good stories in there. And I'm not just talking the parables. There's also some things that may or may not be history, because there's a lot of it that historians are now proving. And it's one of those books that I've dabbled in reading, but I've never really given it the time to read. So it's an odd choice. Anybody knows me is probably thinking, oh my God, what is wrong with her? Why would she say that? But actually, I say it because there are some really good stories in there. And if you want murder and revenge and horrible things happening, go read your Bible, because it really isn't as pleasant as people think.
It would also take you an absolute age to read, so it would keep you occupied for a good while.
Yeah, because I can think a lot of small novels that I thoroughly enjoyed, and believe me, I have. There's lots of novels out there that I love, but I'm thinking I need something a bit weightier to keep me going.
What about you, Martin? What would you take with you?
Well, you need a bit of fun, don't you? So I think I would start with Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, which I think is a fantastic book. And every time I look at it, there's something fresh to appreciate. And there's also a book you can read segments and still enjoy it. So Catch-22. I think Bleak House by Charles Dickens, which is a book I really have always admired. And during the lockdown, I watched the Andrew Davies 2005 TV version, which I thought was fantastic. Best classic adaptation I've ever seen. So Bleak House. And then it's a desert island, so I'd have to take Agatha Christie, and Then There Were None. And think, well, things could be worse.
What about you, Cathy? What would be your 3 picks?
Well, I'm going for volumes, which are collected works, because it's still a book, but there's a lot of it.
That's fine. You are permitted.
The complete works of William Shakespeare would be number 1 on my list. I love reading Shakespeare. I love reading Shakespeare aloud, so I could go and read it to a tree if I was feeling lonely. All emotions are there, and I couldn't live without it. The next thing I'd like is the complete Sherlock Holmes, please. There are lots of them. They're short, they're sharp. There are the novels as well. Yes, I've got my big, exactly. Yes, I've got my big fat collection over there as well. And then a bit of an oddity, and I don't own this book. I don't even know what this book is called. Maybe somebody listening will know what it's called. Maybe even Martin. It's a big fat book, and I think it's called 100 Famous Cases, and it's transcripts of 100 legal cases from the Old Bailey, and they go through from the 1800s right through. It was an old book when I read it, and I read it when I was very young, so I think it probably stopped about 1950. I loved them, and when I say I blame my mother, that was probably on my dad's bookshelf. It smelled, it was badly foxed. I loved it, and the print was tiny. I absolutely adored it. I don't know what it's called. I've never been able to find it. And if I spent long enough on Google, I might be able to. But it fascinated me. And I'd love to read it again as an adult, because I only read it as a child. It probably got a lot to answer for.
Well, that sounds absolutely
Notable
brilliant.
British trials, maybe.
Notable British trials, maybe? Okay, thank you.
That sounds brilliant. I'm going to put that on my list of things to read, because that sounds completely fascinating. So we're coming to the end of my questions, and my chat box has been flashing while we've been talking. So for the last one from me, before we pass over to audience questions, is an elevator pitch.
Oh.
So I'm going to ask you to talk about either your latest release, or I know that some of you have upcoming books that are coming out this year as well. So 1 minute elevator pitch for your recent book. Cathy, would you like to start us off?
Well, I can talk very fast now. The Kate Morgan mysteries, number 10 is coming. If you haven't read the first 9, now's the time to get going with it, folks. This is number 9, The Corpse with the Crystal Skull, set in Jamaica, not pandemic times. The Corpse with the Iron Will is coming out in June, and as I've already mentioned, it has Kate and Bud at home. So if you like traditional puzzle plot mysteries with a Welsh Canadian who sounds exactly like me when she talks, this is who you hear when you're reading the books. Those would be the books for you. I hope you enjoy them, but if you like a psychological suspense, go for The Wrong Boy. Quite a different atmosphere. I love being with Kate. I hope you're enjoying being with Kate as well. Everything she eats and drinks, I've eaten and drunk as well. So the research was onerous, especially the one set in Mexico where tequila is involved. So please consider buying the 10th, but in the meantime, make the most of the 9 that are available to you. And I hope you enjoy spending time with Kate and getting to know Bud. Have a go with Kate.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cathy. Gail?
Right, well, if you like books in odd locations, any of my 4 will suit you. I've got a prison, a bank robbery gone wrong, and the aftermath of that. Or you can go up to London and Cadair Idris in the chair. But if you want to know a little bit more about Wales, hopefully by the end of this year, the first in a series called Celtic Cross will be coming out. And it is a police procedural, but there's something very, very different about one of my policemen. And it will take you on some interesting diversions from normality. And it all happens up in, of all places, Merthyr Tydfil, who most people will have heard of as just for the coal mining. But yeah, so that's what's coming next is that.
Fantastic. Brilliant. I'm going to have to read that, Gail, because that's my hometown.
Oh, right.
So I'm definitely going to be picking that up. Martin, what about you?
Well, my latest book, which did come out during the pandemic, was Mortmain Hall, and that's the second Rachel Savage. So some people prefer to read the first one, Gallows Court, first, but I tried to write it so it would stand up on its own 2 feet. If you started with that one, I think that's important with the series. You can dive in anywhere, hopefully. And it's a book I really loved writing. It was a very elaborate murder mystery. As I say, there's a clue finder at the end which lists 30 clues, and it was great fun, and really. It's all about the ins and outs of how to commit the perfect crime. And that's it, Mortmain Hall.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Enough from me now. I have my list of questions here from the audience. Okay, so we have a question from Anne Patrick, and this one's for Cathy. She says, I just finished your standalone, The Wrong Boy. Absolutely loved it. Will you continue to write more standalones?
Yes. At the moment, I'm giving the emphasis to my Kate Morgan mysteries because they've been optioned for television, and therefore we're working, trying to make, I want to make sure there are as many to go on to television as possible. The lovely people Free at Last TV are making them. They are the people who make the Agatha Raisin series. So I'm working with them. I want to keep focusing on Kate, but Detective Inspector Evan Glover in The Wrong Boy, I don't think I can just drop him. I know he's retired, but he might need to be resurrected a little bit. But it's very much a standalone. And yes, I'm going to do more along that line of the standalone novels.
Brilliant. I'm sure Anne will be really, really pleased.
And thank you for choosing it, Anne.
Now, this question is from the Book Trail, and it's for Martin. And it asks, where is Mortmain Hall inspired by? I would love to go.
Well, it's well guessed. There's a lovely review on Book Trail, which I'm very, very grateful for. Just today, I was thrilled. Mortmain Hall, the setting on the Yorkshire coast, just north of Scarborough, was inspired by a place I visited as a small boy, Ravenscar, which was meant to be a new resort, but they ran out of money, so there's just the foundations laid for this new town, and there's this solitary old hotel on the cliff top, and there's some pretty wild bit of the North Sea underneath. So really, Ravenscar was where I went to research the setting, and although it's fictionalised, that was really the inspiration. Ravenscar in North Yorkshire, just a few miles north of Scarborough.
Fantastic. Okay. Our next question is from our own lovely Crime Cymru co-chair and festival organiser, Alice. And she has asked, so Gail told us that she also writes in steampunk, but what genre would Martin and Cathy write in if they was forced to swap genre? Should we start with you, Martin?
Well, I've written a few ghost stories and a few horror stories, so it would be something along those lines. Those are genres. I've also written a sort of futuristic sci-fi short story, but I think I'm better suited to supernatural, maybe M.R. Jamesy type stories in between ghost stories and horror stories, that sort of thing. And then I've got various ideas for stories along those lines. So one of these days, when I get a bit more time, I'll have a crack at it.
Kathy, what about you?
Do you know, it's funny, I've got to say I'm with Martin there. I would love to be able to write science fiction. I don't think I'm up to it because I don't know enough about science, but the concept of otherworldliness, call that ghosties and ghoulies or woo-woo, the things that can pass between, the things that are in the cracks, that's always fascinated me. And if I were to veer off from crime, that for me would be the area that would draw me in. The unexplained and the unexplainable. And it's a good it's a good foil to solving crimes, because you can solve crimes, you know, you wrap it all up in a bow and off you go. The whole thing about the questionable is that it is unsolvable.
Brilliant. Now, Gail, you write crime, you write steampunk, you've dabbled in romance. You told us earlier, is there another genre that you'd like to dip your toe into?
Well, oddly enough, like the others, I also write horror. So yeah, I've had steampunk, horror, erotica, crime, already published in all of those genres. But I have to say, oddly enough, what I was mentioning about the series based in Merthyr Tydfil is it's bringing in the elements that Cathy and Martin are talking about, with that twist of the supernatural, a bit in the way that James Oswald does with his series. So I'm already kind of veering out. And strangely enough, most of the steampunk is actually crime fiction as well. It's just under the steampunk banner more than the crime banner.
Brilliant. Okay, so next question. We have a question from Philip Gwyn-Jones, who asks, could I ask the panel to name their desert island crime novel? Should we start with you, Cathy?
My desert island crime novel. Oh, what am I going to be happy with on a desert island? Something richly written, something investigative. I think I would probably want to go with an Agatha Christie, and I think I would have to go with, you see, it's then difficult. It's like, which child do you want to take with you and which do you want to throw off the island? It's almost impossible. A lucky dip of Agatha Christie, and okay, The Mystery of the Blue Train, featuring Poirot, because it takes place in the south of France, which I love. It's got a duel, it's got a death. Of course, that would be my one. Yeah. Mystery of the Blue Train.
Okay, I'm going to interject really quickly before I ask Martin and Gail for their answers. Since you're all kind of Agatha fans, are you, oh, Gail's not, are you Poirot or are you the superior character? That's my question.
Oh, phrasing the question that leads to the answer, eh?
Well, there is only one correct answer to this one, but I'll let you go, Cathy.
I like to have slippers and a dressing gown, so I'd like to take both, please.
Okay, I suppose I'll let that one go. What about you, Martin?
Well, I think the Poirots are the better mysteries, but Marple is the better character. So I'll sneak out of it that way. And in terms of the desert island, if I were not to take and then were none, I think my favourite crime novel would probably be Ruth Rendell, under the name of Barbara Vine, A Fatal Inversion, which is a quite brilliant, very dark novel, psychological suspense, and a mixture of great characterisation, great setting, and great plot. So what more could you ask for?
What more could you ask for, indeed? Have we inspired you, Gail, to pick up some Agatha? No,
I have. To be fair, I have tried. I think she's writing in a time that I have very little connection with, and I don't feel connected with it. So I'm not interested in Agatha at all. I'm sorry. I get told that I'm wrong on this all of the time because Agatha Christie is the best writer ever. But not for me, thank you. Though I have to say, I have enjoyed quite a few of the adaptations on television. Some of which I think are appalling, some of which are great. The only thing I can judge, therefore, of either of Marple or Poirot is I'd far rather watch And Then There Were None, which is neither of them. Sorry to be the outsider on this. However, I do know what my desert island crime book would be, and it's The Business of Dying by Simon Kernick. I think he's a wonderful writer. It's one of the first ones of his I think I ever read. Stars Dennis Milne, who is a copper who, a bit like, he kind of influenced Charlie Bell in Locked Up. He does the right thing, not necessarily the legal thing. So that's the book that I will take with me.
I love these kinds of questions because I always get fantastic recommendations. It means that my to be read pile grows exponentially, but I always get great recommendations. Okay, next question. We have a question from Nellie Williams, who is asking, Cathy, do people ask you where your accent is from and make wild guesses?
You know, it's funny. Yes, they do. I was at an event in Bristol, and somebody said they thought I was Australian. Someone else thought I was Irish. I mean, it's definitely a Swansea accent. I then lived in London for a long time. I've been here for 20 years. My husband's from Swansea. I talk to my mum and my sister on the phone every day for an hour or so. So I think we're keeping the Swansea accent going between us, but it becomes changed over the years. So it's a bit of a weird one. And when I say things like sure, because I do tend to say sure, I sound a bit more Irish. What I think has changed more here is my vocabulary rather than necessarily my accent, but a lot of the corners are knocked off it. When I go to conventions in the US, this is the only form of Welsh accent most of the people there have heard. So to them, this is a Welsh accent. So sorry, Wales.
I have to be honest, I don't think in those 20 years that you've spent in Canada that you've lost any of your Welsh accent. You still sound thoroughly Swansea to me, Cathy.
Well, I think I do too, but there we are.
Okay, next question. We have quite a few, and we don't have a great deal of time left, so I'm going to try and rattle through them quite quickly. So this one's from Beverly Jones. And she asked, do you think Welsh crime fiction has a particular style or content in common, or is its strength its diversity? So if we come to you, Gail, first.
I would actually say its strength is its diversity. You can find all manner of stories around Wales, and we've got such a range within Crime Cymru, the members. I mean, you look down that list, the different things that people are writing, it's incredible. I actually think its strength is that it's very diverse. It's lots of different things, lots of different people.
Cathy?
Yeah, I would agree. Whatever type of crime you fancy, a Welsh person or someone who now lives in Wales is writing it. If whatever you like, go and find out from Crime Cymru who's writing it. They'll be writing it well. I think the uniqueness of the Welsh voice might come through in terms of the rhythm of the language, maybe, and the richness of the vocabulary and the viewpoint. I do think that those are things that do become woven into the crime storytelling. But whatever type of crime you're into, there's a Welsh offering catering to those requirements. So hunt them out, and we're helping you find them.
And Martin?
Well, yes, I agree, and I think it's generally true of crime fiction that there is something there for everybody, whether you go for the Christies or the much darker, or if like me, you like all these different kinds of stories, as long as they're well done. And that's true of Welsh crime fiction. I think it's true of the genre in general.
Mm.
Brilliant. Okay, next question is from Jenny Blinson, and she's asking, what advice would you give to a fledgling crime writer, and what was your worst case of writer's block? Should we start with you, Cathy?
Read. Don't just read books about how to write books. Read the sorts of books that you believe you're going to write. So read wide, work out what's your favorite subgenre, then read deep. Because if you don't read it, if you don't understand it, if you don't know the rhythm of it, the shape of it, the reader expectations, you won't end up writing as well as you possibly could. So read. Touch wood, in terms of writer's block, I don't know what that is. I mean, I grew up in advertising, PR, you've got deadlines you have to write. So I haven't had writer's block, I don't think. Although there are days where I don't feel like writing. I don't see that as block. I'll just go and do something else instead.
Great. And Martin?
I think it's really important to believe in what you do. And the other thing that's really important is to keep at it. And if you believe and you keep at it, then sooner or later, it's a very tough game writing, very tough. There are a lot of downs as well as ups. But if you believe in it and if you keep going, then sooner or later you will get somewhere. And that it's keeping the faith that's really important. In terms of writer's block, I'm rather like Cathy. I love writing, so I know writers for whom it's a major problem, but it's not afflicted me so far.
Lucky. And you, Gail?
Research. Do your research. There are things within, particularly if you're writing something like a police procedural, there are things that rules you can break, but you have to research them to know which you can break and which you can't. So do your research and read around the topic as much as possible. In terms of writer's block, I run out of time before I run out of words. So I've been very, very fortunate. I rarely get writer's block. And if I do, I simply switch to a different story, write something completely new and different, and then come back and I'm usually over whatever's blocked me.
Brilliant. Okay, next question is from Kate Wright. And she asks, how much is your writing influenced by other crime writers? Should we start with you, Martin?
Well, I think that subconsciously one's always influenced by what one reads. I agree with Cathy about the importance of reading. So yes, there are influences, but you absorb those influences and then you try to carve your own way forward. You take the best, hopefully, of what you enjoy, but then you give it your own imprint. True originality is very, very difficult, very, very difficult. But if you find your own voice, then that's the key, and you can absorb those lessons from the other great writers, and then develop yourself, and hopefully add something fresh to the genre.
Brilliant. Gail?
Yeah, it's much the same. You do read so much, you can't help but take a certain amount of it in. If I have to pick one person who has actually definitely influenced my writing, it would go back to Simon Kernick, because once you start with them, you just have to keep turning the pages. And I would love to think one day that that's what my books make people do. You just have to keep turning the pages. But I think you can't help but be influenced, not just by other crime writers, but by any other writer that you read, because you will never get to the end of a book without finding something in that book that you love. And you will carry that in your heart and minds, and you may never even notice that you've got that influence, but it's there. I think we all do it. We all do it unconsciously.
Cathy?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, on a granular level, I am the sum of everything I've ever read, and probably quite a lot of what I've seen as well, let's be honest, because I also view a lot of crime fiction on screens, small and large. So I can't help but all of that through osmosis. It's gone in, it'll probably come out some way. But Martin put his finger on it. It's about finding your own voice and allowing that to tell what might not be an original story, but becomes a totally unique story because it's told by that voice with those characters. So the setup can be the same, but the whole development of it is different. And when I wrote the Kate Morgan Mysteries, that first novel I wrote was in my voice. That's why it's first person told by Kate. And I think for me, that was the cop-out way of finding my voice. It's like if Kate is looking at it, what would Kate do? What would Cathy do? You need to think through it in your own voice. But yeah, finding an original plot is really hard to come by unless you've got those elements in it that are unique to you. So use it all.
Brilliant. Okay, we have 3 more questions. So the next one, and I apologise, I'm probably going to butcher this, but it's J. Tori Seva, sorry. And they ask, what are your other names, Gail? And I'm assuming that they mean what do you write under? What is your pen name?
Crime is GB Williams. It's not exactly a pen name. It is actually my initials. So I am GB Williams. But if it comes to steampunk, it's Abby Barden. Barden is obviously the B from GB Williams. And you'll also find me occasionally as Gail B. Williams in some of my earlier published works, mostly which was steampunk and horror.
Fantastic. Okay. Now we have a question for Martin from Cathy Blake, who asks, what Golden Age mystery writer needs to be rediscovered?
Well, British Library has certainly brought out a lot of previously forgotten writers. I'm very proud to have been involved with that and bring back great writers like Mary Kelly, Margot Bennett, Julian Simmons, and many, many more. Of those who haven't yet come back, to the best of my knowledge, I think Bruce Hamilton, the brother of Patrick Hamilton, who wrote Rope and Gaslight, he's an interesting writer. I'd like to see his work back in print. It's been out of print for too long.
Fantastic. And then the last question that we have is a question from Michelle, who asks, do you also read true crime on a regular basis, or when you have time? And I suppose this question is for all of you. So should we start with you, Cathy?
No, I don't. I'm not a huge consumer of true crime. I get enough true crime on the news bulletins every morning. I choose to escape through books, and I can filter the most grisly crime fiction because I know it's fiction. My playground is not true crime, and I realise a lot of people enjoy it. Not my bailiwick, folks.
Brilliant. Gail, what about you? Do you consume any true crime?
I'm quite similar to Cathy. I will read the newspapers, which is where I get some of my story ideas from. But the reality is, crime is a horrible, horrible thing in reality. And unlike Cathy, I can escape into that world of being horrible because it's fiction, and because I know by the end of the story, by the end of the book, I get a happy ending in the whoever the criminal is gets their comeuppance. However, no, I don't. I just couldn't do that with crime fiction because it's too horrible and it's too likely to get away with things. So.
Martin, what about you?
Yes, I've edited a book of essays called Truly Criminal for the Crime Writers Association, and I've read a lot of true crime over the years. Things like Truman Capote, In Cold Blood, which is a really interesting book, and some of the old trials we were talking about with Cathy before. And I also wrote a novel based on the life and crimes of Dr. Crippen, a book called Dancing for the Hangman. Wasn't a particularly high profile book, but it was a book I was very proud of. I think it's actually one of my better books, actually, and I think I'd like to bring it back one day. So the Crippen case always interested me. So yes, I'm interested in true crime, particularly if it's well written.
Brilliant. Now, time is running away from us. So all that's left for me to do is to thank you, Martin, Gail, and Cathy, for joining me tonight, and thank you everybody who's watching, and those who ask questions as well. Just to remind everybody that's watching, if you'd like to buy our authors' books, please consider clicking through from the programme to cover, which is in Mumbles in Swansea, where you'll be able to buy all of our wonderful authors' books. And finally, on behalf of the Gwyl Cymru Crime Online Festival, I'd like to thank you and wish you all a good night, and we hope to see you, fingers crossed, in Aberystwyth next year. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.